My oncologist issued me an estrogen blocker. I have not taken it because my blood work says I'm producing less than 5 and the norm is greater than 69. I don't see the question in that. Her office won't return my call, so I need advice. I had a right breast mastectomy, no lymph gland tested, no chemo, no radiation, Hertz negative, 1 tumor, first stage, 3 tumors at stage 3. Jan, the best advice I really can give you is you need to find a doctor who deals with cancer, who understands that. There's a really great facility in Mexico, actually in Cancun. There's another one in Tijuana. One of them is called Hope for Cancer. Hope, the number 4, Cancer. And you can find their website. I think it's hopeforcancer.com. But Dr. Tony Jimenez is the doctor, and they do a very, very thorough and very, very good job. I'm personally not an oncologist, so I don't want to give you advice on what you should or shouldn't be doing other than the diet and the lifestyle recommendations that we were talking about today, because you really got to have somebody look at that more meticulously in that direction. Dr. Osborne, I have a recent 3-centimeter adenomatoid lump and 2 smaller ones, which causes the tendency to grow lumps and ways to prevent shrink them. Is chemo still recommended for cancer treatment? Again, I would say the same thing to you, Amelie. If you've got those, but one of the things that you should do is actually have your hormone levels tested. You should have your estrone, your estradiol, your estrione, and your progesterone. Those should all be like part of your workup that your doctor's running on you to help you understand how better your hormones can be balanced. Because I've seen some fibrocystic breast issues in women be largely associated with progesterone deficiency. And so, again, when you start getting a lump in your breast, a fibrocystic lump, a lot of women run in and get the mammogram, and then they get the scare, right? Because sometimes what happens to the mammogram is when they do the biopsy, they can damage the cells and it comes back inconclusive. And now you're sitting around waiting for 8 weeks, 10 weeks, just panicked in strict fear that you might have cancer. And that in and of itself, the fear creates such damage to women's mentality and to their immune system. Remember that heavy stress like that depletes your immune function and can allow for something to become worse. But adenoids, or not adenoids, fibroids in the breast tissue, in my experience, 2 things that we see a lot of, and one is progesterone deficiency, the other is iodine deficiency, can cause fibrocystic breast disease as well. Somebody's asking about metronidazol, which is an antiparasitic, while doing a gut cleanse. Generally speaking, yes, you can, but they're both cleansing your gut. Metronidazol typically cleans people out pretty well. Can nuclear medicine scan for the heart involving radioactive tracer injected intravenously into the arm cause breast cancer as the heart is under the left breast? I don't know that I've seen any research directly with causation, but we know radioactive material increases the risk for cancers because it creates mutagenesis in your cells, and that, whether it's a breast tissue or whether it's other tissue, there's definitely linkage to a lot of these radioactive tracers and dyes to mutagenesis. Can severe psoriasis on the breast cause breast cancer? I would say probably not the psoriasis itself that directly causes the breast cancer so much as the psoriasis is an autoimmune disease. And if you have it and you don't understand why, remember your immune system is, instead of protecting you from things like cancer cells, it's actually creating a reaction in your skin. So again, a lot of your resources are going toward attacking your own tissue and being moved away from protecting you from things like cancer. So indirectly, people that have an autoimmune process can, yes, definitely it can progress into different kinds of cancers. Let's see here. Keep going down. Let's see, for women who still have their menstrual period at 53, does it increase their risk for breast cancer even if they're fit and eat clean? No, not at all. Having a menstrual cycle doesn't increase your risk for breast cancer. I would say having a menstrual cycle healthfully into old age is probably a reduced risk for the development of cancer. Different requirements for states. California wants every 5 years if normal mammograms. In Oregon, they want every year, every 2 years if you complain. Yeah, that's where I just say what they want isn't as important as what you allow them to do. Your medical autonomy is critical, so make sure you protect it. I like that comment from Mark. Japanese women have far more iodine in their diet and have much less breast cancer than Americans. Yeah, because this again, going back to what I said about fibrocystic breast disease, iodine deficiency early shows up as cystic breast disease, and that's absolutely true. Japanese women have far greater reduction in occurrence of breast cancer. Now, one of the things you can do if you want to get more iodine in your diet is seaweed and seafood, which is missing from a lot of folks' diets. It's not highly emphasized, especially if you live in a non-coastal area where seafood is not fresh. Yeah, so the rate of black men having a higher rate of breast cancer contractibility than white men has to actually, there's some studies showing that it has to do with vitamin D. The darker your skin, the harder it is for you to produce vitamin D, and this is why we see a kind of a prolific vitamin D deficiency in the African American population. And that, vitamin D doesn't just increase the risk for breast cancer, it increases the risk for high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, and 18 other forms of cancer. So it's very, very crucial to get your vitamin D. Let's see here. Yeah, so the question is that men who smoke have a higher risk of getting gynecomastia, which is actually growing breast tissue on their chest, feminine breast tissue on their chest. Does this increase the chance of getting breast cancer? It does. Gynecomastia is not a good thing, and oftentimes what happens in men is they lack the nutrients to convert testosterone properly, so their body starts driving the production of estrogen, and that can create part of that problem for men. Hyperestrogen production. Another big one that does that we didn't really talk about, but I think it's worth mentioning, is certain mold metabolites. So fusarium, which is a type of common mold in water damaged buildings, produces a mycotoxin that mimics estrogen. It's an estrogen mimic. And I've seen cases where we see major problems associated with estrogen dominance in people with mycotoxin toxicity. And so again, fusarium, it's the name of the estrogen, or the name of the estrogen mimic, or the mycotoxin is called zearalenone, and it's another one that can mimic estrogen and create a serious problem in terms of your hormone balance. Connection between breast cancer and osteoporosis, estrogen, but not so much. Again, this goes back to what I said earlier, Dahlia, is that a lot of research is showing that not enough estrogen can actually contribute to breast cancer, just like not enough estrogen can also contribute to osteoporosis. But I think where medicine went wrong is the estrogens that they were giving for so many years to women were synthetic versions of estrogen that actually increased the risk of disease. And so, but some of these natural estrogens, we're not seeing that same correlation pan out. Barbara's asking on what we were talking about iodine earlier with breast issues, and that is, what's my opinion on taking iodine if you have Hashimoto's? I think it's fine. I think a lot of people have published that you shouldn't ever take iodine if you have Hashimoto's. I haven't found that to be true. Iodine I found to be safe with Hashimoto's. That means if the Hashimoto's is, those of you who aren't familiar, that's when you're making antibodies against your own thyroid. Now, there is a caveat. I don't go, some therapeutic dose of iodine is about 50 milligrams a day. I wouldn't go that high in somebody that had Hashimoto's. I would probably stick to somewhere around that 12.5 milligram a day if there was an iodine deficiency. But remember, iodine's an essential nutrient, and if you're deficient in it, it can be very critical for your body to be able to maintain its function, including it has anti-cancer, anti-radioactive effects. Iodine, very important, obviously, for your thyroid hormone, the T4 and the T3 production. So I don't agree with some that say that iodine should not be taken if you have Hashimoto's, and I have not seen any clinical indication or contraindication rather for people that have Hashimoto's taking iodine, again, in that 12.5 milligram range. Is there a connection with celiac disease and chronic fungal disorders of the gut? Monica, there's a huge connection between celiac and fungal disorders of the gut. And I'm actually going to be flying to Nashville this weekend to talk about that very thing, doing an entire talk on the connection between chronic gluten exposure, feeding candida infection in the gut. But the two very much go hand in hand. And one of the things too is that candida, once you have an overgrowth, candida produces proteins that mimic gluten. So remember, gluten feeds the overgrowth of candida, then candida produces a protein that mimics gluten. So it's like a double whammy. Do you have to increase iodine gradually? Some people do, but the reason why they do is not because of Hashimoto's. So like, when we're talking about this 12.5, one of the biggest reasons why we see iodine creating an effect in individuals who have Hashimoto's has nothing to do with the iodine. It has more to do with a fluoride, a bromine, or a chlorine toxicity. Remember that combined, these three are also there. When you combine these with iodine, these three plus iodine fall in this family of elements called halides, and halides they have similar characteristics, so they compete with each other, right? And so these three, they will compete with iodine for uptake into your thyroid gland. So, if we're talking about T4, what is that for? The 4 is iodine, but if you have too much fluoride, bromine, or chlorine, they can replace iodine, and so your 4 in your T4 becomes maybe fluoride or bromine or chlorine. And so what happens when people have, and by the way, these halides displacing iodine from your thyroid hormone can help to trigger autoimmune thyroid disease. And so what happens is sometimes, I had somebody earlier today, their fluoride levels were triple the normal, right? I mean, they were so overfluoridated, it's fluorotoxicosis, and it was greatly affecting and impacting their thyroid, which was in turn affecting their muscles and their joints, because thyroid sets your metabolic rate. But a large part of it was because of the fluoride toxicity. And so a person like that, we give iodine. Part of what happens when you give iodine to somebody with fluoride toxicity, and this is true of bromine or chlorine toxicity, is you start pushing this stuff out. You push it out. So you detox. And so those reactions that people experience aren't iodine creating the problem. It's the pushing out of these other halides. And that, again, that can make a person symptomatic in the short term. So some people do better with a titration, meaning starting at lower levels of iodine and just slowly increasing incrementally. But if you're struggling with this and your doctor hasn't measured your fluoride and your bromine, your halides and your iodine, like that's first step one, right? So that you have a good understanding of what's going on. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, so some of you are commenting, yeah, Dr. Ryan Cole, the pathologist who's looking a lot at cancer right now, is seeing a huge increase in cancer as a result of what's happening. And that's absolutely true. And I've heard that from a lot of my fellow colleagues in their clinical settings where people that had cancer, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, they've been in remission for a really long time. We're seeing these cancers come roaring back as a result of the disease that shall not be named treatment that many people are getting. Will taking sea salt and magnesium help? So taking sea salt, you're going to get minimal iodine from that. I would really recommend, instead of doing that, I recommend eating, seafood and eating kelp. Kelp is a rich source of dietary iodine. Magnesium can help, but it's not going to help correct an iodine deficiency. Let's see. What's the connection between, I think I answered that one. What alternative is there for vitamin C if absorption is an issue? Heard niacin could be one. I mean, look, the fact of the matter is that if you're not absorbing vitamin C, push more of it. Vitamin C will absorb through passive diffusion. If you get the gradient high enough in the GI tract, you're going to absorb it into the colon, or now from the colon and the intestine rather, into the bloodstream. So I've never seen the issue where somebody couldn't absorb vitamin C unless they were just full-blown Crohn's disease and couldn't retain anything, and they just had liquid bowels, and that was 20 liquid bowels a day or something like that. But that's a different scenario. Is the keto diet the cure for cancer? I don't think so. I think the keto diet starves cancers of sugar, and in that way it can be used as a very helpful tool for many people, but I don't know that it's necessarily the cure, because sugar is not the only trigger for cancer. Cancer has multiple triggers, as we've talked about tonight, and a keto diet is not going to cure the fact that somebody's rubbing pesticides or cosmetics or drinking plastics or eating off of plastics, etc. So, a keto diet doesn't solve for that. So a keto diet can be helpful because sugar's a trigger, but again, not necessarily the solution. Let's see here. If one has been drinking Ozarka water in plastic jugs, how can we detox the BPA? It's a great question. I think one of the best things to detox those types of toxins out of you is to quit drinking them. That's step one. Step two is, remember, you have 4 primary pathways of detoxification. Pathway number 1 is through your poop, and pathway number 2 is through your urine. Number 3 is through your sweat. Number 4 is as you breathe. You actually breathe out toxins. So making sure those 4 pathways are turned on. A lot of times people get constipated, and so their gut detoxification is broken, or their liver's bogged down and they're not producing bile adequately. Bile is a toxin binder and can help get rid of toxins. And so their gut detoxification is broken for whatever various reasons. So, that's a whole probably weeks of conversation in and of itself. And then there's some people never exercise, so they never sweat. They never actually expel toxins through their skin because they never actually do enough physical exertion to create sweating. And this is where some people go in and they do like saunas, like infrared sauna, which can help. But those are passive therapies, and passive therapies, in my experience, don't work as well as active therapies. And active therapies where you do the work and not a machine or not something else doing the work. So in the case of exercise allows you to sweat, but exercise also pumps your lymphatic fluid, and it mobilizes those toxins out of your body through your sweat. You can sit on your keister in infrared, but you're not mobilizing toxins that way. You are sweating, but you're not mobilizing through lymphatic. The other is practice deep breathing. A lot of people forget to breathe. They're at a computer desk, hunched over all day. They reduce their oxygen input and output, and that can pose a problem for detoxification as well. And then a lot of people don't get adequate hydration, and so they're not urinating frequently enough to rid their body of toxins. So again, we're just talking about general elimination. Those 4 pathways should be ramped up to the best of your ability if you're trying to get the BPA out of you. There are other things that you can do as well, certain types of antioxidants that can help with that. One of my favorite methods is vitamin C. Vitamin C is like human duct tape. It works on so many different aspects of physiology. And so vitamin C in higher doses to bowel tolerance is one of my favorite ways to help people do a generic type of detox. Again, the number 1 rule of any detox is that you're no longer being exposed to the toxin that you're trying to detox from. Once you're no longer being exposed, then you can implement detox strategies. So somebody said, I'm scared to knock over glass. I talk about drinking out of glass instead of plastic. Put it in a silicone wrap, right? Get you a glass water bottle that's wrapped in silicone. That way, if you knock it over, you don't have to worry about it breaking. I like that. Matthew Gibbs, just having some Warrior bread with slow-cooked grass-fed beef roast. Man, you're making me hungry. It's dinner time. Love that. Can you name some, let's see, go back up. Can you name some supplements that help to heal leaky gut and inflammation? It depends, Monica, on what's causing your leaky gut and inflammation. So, there are a lot of different supplements that can be helpful and supportive of the gut lining. I mean, I can give you some examples. L-glutamine is definitely one. Butyrate. as a supplement can be very helpful for re-energizing the gut. There are other supplements like vitamin A can be very crucial for the recovery of gut cells and the turnover of gut cells. Zinc, very, very beneficial to the gut and also in producing digestive enzymes. And then you have probiotics. The probiotics are very important because if your leaky gut's being caused by bacterial imbalances, that probiotic can help restore some balance to the GI tract. So there's a whole host of things. What you might find helpful, Monica, if you don't already have it, is check out my guide to leaky gut. It's about an hour and a half long, and we do a real deep dive on everything leaky gut related. Do I recommend celery juice for any reason? Some people do celery juice every morning to have regular bowel movements. My question to those people, though, is what do you need celery juice to have a regular bowel movement for? If your bowels were working, you wouldn't have to drink celery juice. Is there anything wrong with drinking celery juice? Not necessarily, but one of the things that we know about over-juicing, and especially using the same type of plant repetitively in mass quantities, and we see this with kale, we also see this with some of the other cruciferous, we see this with celery, is their ability to detox the soil of heavy metals. So if they're grown in a soil that contains things like lead or other heavy metals, then you can actually get exposure. I see this all the time in people that do heavy juicing, especially like with kale, we'll see thallium toxicities in them because thallium is a common metal found in organic farming soils. Lead can be too. Let's see, go down on that right side for me. Yes, a lot of questions about what do you wash your water bottles out with. One of the best things that you can do to wash them out is put them in the dishwasher, right? Put them in an actual dishwasher where that hot steam and soap can actually get to it and neutralize any kind of germs that might build up in it. I mean, that's a no-brainer on that one. I saw my GI for nausea and stomach bloating. He wants to do an upper and lower endoscopy along with a colonoscopy. What would you recommend? You know, you could do that. I don't really know that I could recommend something vastly different. I mean, it's pretty vague to say nausea and stomach bloating. I mean, there could be a lot of different things. But, you know, nausea and stomach bloating, for example, the upper GI might find H. pylori, which is a type of bacterial infection that can cause that type of issue, in which case an endoscopy might be very warranted for you. But it may not be anything. You know, you may do a GI and a GI series, upper and lower, and you may find nothing. In which case, then it would be more investigation, in my opinion. So it's just really hard to give you, a solid there. I would say start with food. A lot of times people's nausea and stomach bloating is what you put in your mouth, right? And so an endoscopy and a lower GI are not going to solve that. I take don't construe this as medical advice, but I take kind of a off approach to GI uppers and lowers. And the reason why is they're running a fiber optic camera in you. And so what you're relying on is the person whose job it was to clean those instruments. Maybe that person had a bad day today. And most people that go to a GI doctor have really sick problems in their GI tract. A lot of them have infection, bacterial issues. So when they run those scopes up them, basically they're inoculated. Those cameras and those tubes are being inoculated by abnormal bacteria from sick people. Well, if the person whose job it was to clean that material or to clean that equipment very, very well was having a bad day, to me, you run a great risk. That's why before you can do an upper or lower GI, you actually have to sign this multi-page waiver stating that you understand the risks of doing that procedure. So I would always say, it's not a bad idea to just talk to the doctor and talk about all those risks, and that way you can make a better decision for yourself. The difference between regular and plant-based chemo, what you may be referring to is that like the chemo that you might get in a hospital, those are very, very caustic and toxic drugs, whereas plant-based chemo, you might be doing like, some people use like apricot kernels because there's different substances in that material that actually have chemotherapeutic effects. And so a lot of people go that natural route. And if that's what you're referring to as natural chemo, again, I'm not certain what you're asking me. Let's see, what's the best supplement? That's pretty general, Kay. The best supplement to heal with, I mean, if you're just starting with just what could you take, a good supplement to take is a really solid multivitamin. I'm partial to my own formulations. My favorite is something called Ultra Nutrients, which is a formula that I designed specifically, based on years and years of clinical research and practice. And that's the best place to start. If you're just talking about a broad spectrum, good quality multivitamin, multimineral. Now, if you're talking about other supplements for helping your body recover and heal, you've got to really get more specific, because it just depends on, because the best one depends on what the person's low in. I mean, I've seen people with low vitamin D, and for them, vitamin D was very helpful. I've seen people low in zinc, and for them, zinc was very helpful. Where on the contrary, I've seen people that weren't low in zinc, and so they were taking zinc, and it wasn't very helpful. So again, it just depends on what you're low in. How do you detox the radiation from the body? Well, one of the best ways to detox radiation, in my opinion, is iodine, is using iodine. It's very, very effective at neutralizing radiation. And also eating well and having a great plethora of antioxidants in your diet. Because again, how does your body defend itself from all forms of damage? It starts with the right food. There was actually years ago, I went to the Space Congress conference, and scientists from NASA were talking about their research discoveries in the space station, and they were subjecting mice to radioactive ionizing radiation. And, again, these mice were getting cancer, were getting tumors, but when they fed the mice antioxidant-rich blueberries and raspberries, their cancer diminished, and the ones that were fed cancer before being exposed to radiation did not develop cancer. And so again, don't underestimate the power of food. It's full of rich in antioxidants, just like that photopigment in a blueberry or in a raspberry protects that fruit from dehydrating on the vine in the 100-degree weather in the hot sun. It protects you from radiation. That protection transfers to you when you eat them. So food can be very, very critical. Don't forget about food. So supplements to support women diagnosed with breast cancer, I think that's a great question, and I think it depends on what angle you're taking to treat your breast cancer. Because if you're going the realm of chemo, or if you're going the realm of radiation, my advice is going to change. But as a general rule, and this will probably, your oncologist will probably say, that Dr. Osborne doesn't know what he's talking about, and you should never take antioxidants when you're being treated for cancer. I don't agree with that. Regardless, I think if you're just looking at some good quality support overall, if you're on any kind of chemo, you need to be on high doses of B vitamins. Remember, chemo depletes B vitamins and can destroy your gut lining, and it can really cause a lot of malnutrition. So keeping your B12, especially in your folate levels, high during that type of therapy can help preserve your GI tract function and lining and absorption. If you're on any kind of radiative therapies, you have to look at, and it depends on the length of time that you're on it, depends on the location where you're getting it. But there are it's really hard to answer that, because there are certain strategies that you want to implement, but a lot of those strategies are dependent upon the uniqueness of the individual. And I would say if you've got cancer and you're trying to figure out what to supplement with, don't mess around with guessing, because you're going to do yourself a huge detriment by trying to guess your way right. I've seen it all the time in my practice where when we test versus when we guess, the outcomes are always better. And so what I would recommend is what a person needs versus just speculative, hey, take these 5 things. Let's see, my young 37-year-old doctor died of breast cancer in July. I'm so heartbroken. She had plant chemo and surgery. I was shocked how fast it was. Yeah, that's sad. That's very, very sad. Is surgery the only way to unblock the iliac artery without stenosis? That's a very challenging question to ask, and not one I can really answer, because I'm not privy to your image. I'm not privy to the level of blockage. I'm not privy to the other arteries that branch off from that. So there's too much to unpack there. Hello, I have gluten sensitivity. What's the worst for us? Gluten, sugar, or dairy? Pick your poison, Chris. They're all bad. But if you're gluten sensitive, obviously you don't want to eat gluten. Sugar's not going to do you any favors. And dairy, depending on what kind of dairy it is, most dairies mimic gluten, so that's not going to do you any favors either if you're gluten sensitive. Cruciferous vegetables give me constipation even when cooked. Yeah, a lot of people don't do well with cruciferous, and cruciferous are very medicinal for some and very anti-medicinal for others. So this is why we're so unique. This is why not one size fits all. Let's see. How do you deal with the soil? I don't know what you're referring to, Kathleen. The V in the soil. Be more specific so I can understand what you're talking about. Does dense breast tissue with several cysts pose a higher risk for breast cancer? My doctor wants me to rescan in 6 months, and I'm concerned for increased radiation. That's a really great question. Not necessarily. I would figure out why you have the dense breast tissue with cysts. Again, as I mentioned earlier, progesterone deficiency, iodine deficiency, magnesium deficiency, all can be causes of dense fibrocystic breast tissue. Fatty acid deficiency can contribute to that. So, get tested nutritionally, I would say, first and foremost. If you're concerned about ongoing radiation, by rechecking it periodically, ask your doctor about using thermography instead. Thermography is non-radiative, so it's a way to detect heat signatures in your breast. And sometimes when there's a high levels of density on a thermography scan, it can be indicative that you need to have it further investigated, but it's one way to try to help you without exposing yourself to the radiation. But I would look into nutrients, and I would also talk to your doctor about a mammography or about a thermography instead. Question, if I am gluten sensitive but do not have celiac, can I have some deficiency with the sensitivity? Absolutely. If you're talking about nutritional deficiency, it's very common. Can a normal gluten gene mutate from poor diet? No. Your genes, so what you have in terms of your genetics are not going to mutate unless you're talking about exposing yourself to some severe radiation, but your genes are not necessarily going to mutate from a poor diet. Now, your genetic behavior, so the behavior of the genes that you have will ramp up or ramp down based on your behaviors, and that's what happens with gluten genes. If you have them and you expose them to gluten, then they turn on and turn up, and the outcome is inflammatory reactions that can damage your tissue. Let's see. Given that B12, folate, and B6 are required to metabolize estrogens, is high homocysteine correlated with breast cancer? Yes, high homocysteine is definitely correlated with cancer. Homocysteine elevation is correlated with a lot of disease. It's correlated with cancer. It's correlated with stroke and heart attack and diabetes and osteoporosis. Again, it's an inflammatory metabolite. We all produce it, but without B vitamins, we can't recycle it or get rid of it. We also can't generate methionine properly with it, which is a primary methylator, and that we're talking about methylating your different estrogens is a very important process of naturally getting rid of or detoxifying estrogens that can be detrimental. All right, I think we're out of time. I'm hungry. Matthew made me hungry with that warrior bread and roast beef, so I think I'm gonna go home and eat. Look, thanks for spending your Monday evening with me. If you're new to the show, and you need more, you want to get more, make sure you come visit me at glutenfreesociety.org. The only way I can prevent censorship from my information from not reaching you is for you to sign up for my newsletter, because all other mediums of social media that we're involved in are rapidly and constantly censoring our information, just like you saw tonight where the feed went blank for a while. Like we're struggling with these kinds of issues all the time. So If you want to make sure you stay abreast of this information, make sure you sign up for our newsletter. And make sure you share this with somebody that you love. Look, our goal here is to save 100 million lives. So don't be stingy with this information. Get it out there. If you know somebody struggling with breast cancer, if you know somebody who's just got questions about it and needs more information about how to navigate diet and lifestyle to be more preventative, make sure you share this, because together we can help more people, and that's really what it's all about. So we'll see you next Monday night for another episode of Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Wish you excellent health. Take care. Hey, if you've got a functional medicine or health question that you'd like me to answer for you, make sure you send me an email, glutenology@gmail.com, and we'll do our best to create a video answer just for you. Have a great day.